You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is a Friday night, September 29th. The 49ers are days away from taking on another divisional opponent in the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. So as always on a Friday, we're going to dive into some favorable and not so favorable matchups for the 49ers with Laurie Fitzpatrick. How you doing today, Laurie?
Yo, I'm doing awesome. I'm happy it's Friday. I'm not working. This is great. That's all.
Hell yeah. And, last week, we didn't have you on. We missed you, but we know you were celebrating your birthday and you were just telling me how great it was. So we're happy to hear about that.
Yeah, man. Another year older. Dude, I'm like almost, I'm not like almost 40, but like, I'm like, getting towards that 40 every year, so it's kind of scary. I'm not going to
lie. We all are getting, closer to that 40 every year. It's a scary reality we got to face. But glad you could make it this time. And for those of you who are going to be going to the game on Sunday, it looks like it's going to be some great weather as it usually is out there in Santa Clara, 75 degrees, clear skies, nothing about that. But what we're really concerned with are the injuries, right? There's quite a few things to discuss here with the injury report. Most notably with the wide receivers, Juwan Jennings dealing with a shin injury. He is doubtful. And Deebo Samuel, who, much of this week didn't really practice. He was do not practice most of the week. He was limited today in practice. He's dealing with a knee and rib injury. I saw one of the beat writers reported that it's not really the rib that's the issue anymore. It's more so this knee thing. So I would rather them just play it safe and keep them out because you will also notice Brandon Aiyuk, who missed last week's game, he's not on this list this week. So he should be out there. But yeah, the 49ers may be short 2 receivers this week heading into this game against the Cardinals. Running back Elijah Mitchell also has a knee injury. He suffered that in practice yesterday, apparently. So not great for him because he has dealt with a number of injuries throughout his career. And so hopefully it's not something that keeps him out on Sunday, but we'll just have to see. And it seems like as far as both linebackers, Greenlaw and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, both of those guys dealing with ankle injuries, it seems like both of those guys will be able to play. Now, on the Cardinals side, their defensive end, Jonathan Ledbetter, he's going to be out, as well as their linebacker, Josh Woods. And they got a couple of questionable guys. Hollywood Brown dealing with a thumb injury, probably the most notable of this list here. But, I got to imagine he plays. We'll just treat it as if they will play on the show here and just kind of assume. But, yeah, I mean, as far as the 49ers go, like I mentioned, Aiyuk, he's expected to be out there. And, if Deebo and or, Juwan Jennings are going to be out, I'd expect another big game for Ronnie Bell. And, maybe we see Raven McLeod get more snaps as well. So we'll see more of those guys get involved.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see Ronnie Bell out there. We saw he only had 2 receptions last week, but he didn't have any the first 2 weeks. So he's kind of dabbling in, and he's going to be thrown into the limelight this week. But he's out there like a little pit bull last week. So I know everybody saw that clip that was going viral of him just pretty much putting his helmet in one of the defender's chest and basically pancaking him to the ground. So that was kind of fun, doing his own little Deebo Samuel. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to see him out there. It's just, he's going to get thrown in, but sometimes that's the best way. Instead of kind of dabbling in game by game, getting a few more. Nah, just throw me in there. And, hopefully the coaches will be like, oh, wow, maybe we should be playing him more. So that's his ideal scenario, in the end. So
I kind of feel like that's already the case, just based on how he has looked, and Kyle Shanahan said he looks great without the ball in his hands. I really do feel like that's one of the big things for this offense in particular, because you have to do a lot of blocking and all these things. You have to put full effort into these routes. Those are things that Kyle looks at, and Ronnie Bell's already doing those things. So he skipped the rookie doghouse that Kyle has kind of become infamous for. And yeah, it looks like he deserves to be thrown into the fire because he can handle it from what we've seen. So yeah, I am excited too to see Ronnie Bell in this one. We'll talk more about those matchups, some of those guys against this Cardinals defense. First, is some maybe like worrisome matchups, potentially not so favorable for the 49ers. And Laurie, I want to start with the Cardinals run game against the 49ers defense. Because typically, when you're talking about a team's run game, we're usually talking about the running backs. And I'm not too worried about the 49ers being able to stop running backs. They're pretty good at it. But, in this case, we're also talking about, a pretty good quarterback when it comes to being sneaky athletic and running the football, as well as like Rondell Moore as well. So they got a full pack, I think, of guys who they incorporate into their run game. And it's one that they've been relying on heavily for the success of their offense through these first 3 games. Credit to the Cardinals, offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. I actually just found out who he was a couple of days ago. He's a first-time offensive coordinator, and he most recently was the quarterback coach for the Browns last season. But I feel like what he's doing with the Cardinals offense is very like Eagles-esque. A lot of zone read. It isn't just a one-man show. And like, just take this for context. Like Christian McCaffrey, right? He's leading rusher in the NFL right now. James Conner, he has just 87 less yards than McCaffrey at 266 yards. So James Conner has been looking pretty good for the Cardinals so far, and that's kind of what they've been leaning on.
Yeah. And I think this is a good matchup because if you look at what kind of run game the Cardinals have, they like the spread, wide zone, and I think that really matches up perfectly with the wide 9 that the 49ers run. They don't really have to, like, the linebackers don't have to focus on getting sideline to sideline as much because their defensive line is already so wide. So teams are going to want to push it up the middle more, but that's not the Cardinals game plan, like, ever, really. Like, that's not like their scheme. They like to spread it wide. So I think that's a good matchup for the 49ers to be able to stop them there. But yeah, James Conner is definitely a force. He had, I think, what was it? Over 100 rushing yards, or no, he close to a rushing 100 rushing yards. So 266 a pretty good amount.
Yeah.
So yeah, he'll definitely, they'll be fun to kind of watch, but I think it's a good matchup for the 49ers.
Yeah, I hope it is because, the Cardinals have been really good at it. They're 6th in rushing yards per game. They're averaging 156.3 yards on the ground through these first 3 games. And Connor is averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Against the Cowboys last week, he averaged 7 yards per carry. So whatever the Cowboys were doing, the 49ers should just look at that and be like, yeah, we're not doing that. I think that would be a good start. But he's a tough runner too, and he can make defenses look silly. Like 14 forced missed tackles for Connor and 161 yards after contact. So about half of his yardage. We were just saying he has 266 yards on the season. 161 of those came after contact. So the 49ers defense, I think a big thing for them in this one is going to be tackling. You got to make sure your tackling is on point for this game. And the Cardinals are tied for first in NFL in yards before contact too. So just another thing to be aware of. They've been pretty solid in like their run blocking, and I think also like the threat of the zone read is able to freeze defenders that I think like Connor's benefiting from it, and like Dobbs is too whenever he decides to run. And he's sneaky fast, this Dobbs guy, man. I mean, and Dobbs has been in the league for like a bit now, but for some reason, him just being on this Cardinals team, he looks good. He looks like a legit quarterback. He had 55 yards total on the ground against the Cowboys. last week. He had one 44-yard run where Next Gen Stats clocked him at 19.86 miles per hour. So he was the only quarterback tracked in the top 20 in week 3. And you can imagine a bunch of Miami players make the top 20 in week 3. But yeah, he's very fast.
Yeah, he can definitely get around the edge, so you got to watch out for him because he'll be able to cut up the sideline pretty quick. He's I think like his EPA isn't great, but he's in SIS right now. He's top 7 in rushing quarterback. Howell is surprisingly number 5, but in points earned, he's 3 like per. I don't think it's per play, but it's 7th, so it's right behind Patrick Mahomes. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, he's been
on only 12
efficient.
attempts, which like isn't a lot. Lamar's doing 31, Mahomes has 16, Josh Dobbs only has 12, and he's at 7th.
So that's a good thing. They've been kind of like sprinkling it in like sparingly. But I think like also the other guy to be mindful of in this like run game, we already mentioned Connor, we mentioned Dobbs, but Rondell Moore, like he's
quick, man.
And they've been using him everywhere. He's lined up as a slot receiver 72 times, at out wide 31 times, and as a running back 13 times. So they're really trying to put him all over, the field and, find those mismatches. He had a 45-yard touchdown against the Cowboys last week. And so the 49ers on defense have to be on all 10 toes, ready to stop all of these guys. It's easier said than done for sure, I think. And like the one thing that I want to mention too, like I'd say the 49ers are pretty aggressive. Like I have a lot of trust in like Greenlaw and Fred to be able to go like sideline to sideline. And if anything gets past the defensive line, you got those guys who will come up. But I also there was this quote from Tashawn Gibson, and I'll read it off on Joshua Dobbs not sliding. He said, "Every quarterback is a running back until he sees Greenlaw and Fred out there." And the first thing that came to my mind was that's kind of scary because if Dobbs is one of those guys who doesn't slide, still the refs do treat them as quarterback, even though once you scramble or once you go for a run, you're supposed to be considered a running back. But if you hit a quarterback that any way that looks like too aggressive, they'll call a flag for it, right? So for me, Hines says Greenlaw 15-yard penalty incoming. I really hope not, but when I saw this quote, I was like, it made me nervous because I was like, man, I'm scared. I'm scared a little that Greenlaw is gonna get a flag or any of these guys, because when you see a quarterback, you really want to lay a hit on them, especially if they're not sliding, and that could just mean free yards for the Cardinals. So
yeah, I remember back in the day when Carson Wentz he could not slide to save his life. He just he looked like he didn't even know how to, and he was getting a ton of penalties and yards and everything for his team just because he never slid. So I mean, just as long as they don't really go head hunting, they don't lead with their head, hopefully hopefully the refs will kind of be a little lenient. But yeah, nowadays it's tough. They really got to pull up.
Yeah, and Greenlaw has already gotten 2 penalties this season, and I'm pretty sure they've both been reputation calls because they've been kind of ticky-tacky, but just because it's Greenlaw and they know he's had this reputation of those kind of hits, they're not hesitating right now. So that's the one thing I would be kind of worried about. But look, it's going to take all 11 guys on this defense to play disciplined. And if the 49ers can limit the Cardinals' chunk plays, including avoiding, those penalties where you're giving them free yardage, if they can do that, I think they'll be in good shape to stopping the Cardinals. Stop the run game first, force Dobbs to throw, and see what he can do against the 49ers pass defense when he doesn't have complementary football to lean on. It might look a little different.
Yeah.
And so let's see who Dobbs will be throwing to in this one. We already mentioned Marquise Brown. He's questionable with a thumb injury. But like I said, I feel like they'll probably just like tape it up, whatever it is, and I would expect them to be out there. Of course, if he isn't though, like that's a pretty big advantage for the 49ers. But for the sake of like previewing this game, we're just gonna act like he is gonna play. So let's look at like Marquise Brown against these 49ers corners. Thus far, he hasn't had a game above 61 yards. He had 28 yards in week 1, 54 yards and a touchdown in week 2, 61 yards and a touchdown in week 3. So he is like, I guess ramping up some of his involvement. He's been lining up mostly out wide and mostly on the left side, which I think is good because that means he'll be lining up against Charvarius Ward the most in this game. And Mooney Ward has allowed just 59.3 passer rating this season when targeted. He also has 1 interception and 3 pass breakups so far. And, Lenore hasn't been doing so bad himself on the other end. He's been solid. He also has an interception, 76.8 passer rating allowed. The only thing I'd like to see with Lenore is him clean up penalties too. He's been called for 3 so far this season, but I think he'll be fine, especially if he doesn't have to see too much of Hollywood Brown in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one aspect where the 49ers just blow, their opponent out of the water, because when you look at EPA for the Cardinals, for the wide receivers, they don't have like their wide receiver that's like highest on the list is ranked 45th. That's like, 32 teams plus, 15 number 2s. That's right. Well, that's for air yards 20 plus. So that's going deep. That's so when you think about, or when you look at 15 yards plus, the only person that comes up is Michael Wilson. He has 7 targets, 15 yards plus. But they don't really have much. So that's why I think like if they're able to, hold them off, like, keep them on the line. Don't let them don't give them too much space, but you can, make them go deep, because I think the more time you give that defensive line to get home, it's better. So
that's true. But like, I'm glad that you mentioned like the deep plays or like deep attempts, because the 49ers defense so far have done a really good job of limiting explosive plays this season. And I don't know if you recall, Laurie, or if you were like, watching the 49ers like this, but if you did, you knew they were a really good defense. But the one Achilles heel they had is that they allowed a lot of explosive plays last year, and like their secondary was always the issue. So this year they've really made it a point to like fix that. And so far, the 49ers defense has allowed just 5 explosive plays through the first 3 weeks, 2 runs of 10 plus yards and 3 passes of 20 plus yards. That's the fewest explosive plays allowed in the NFL so far. So they've done a really good job. But the one interesting thing I did find is so far, like the Cardinals offense, we've been mentioning how good they've been. They've had 8 explosive plays of 20 plus yards in each of their last 2 games. So like they really put it on the Giants and the Cowboys as far as their offense and getting those explosive plays. So I think guys on the 49ers defensive side who are going to be like a big part of that. We already mentioned like the corners, but I also feel like the safeties, right? Like Talanoa Hufanga, Sean Gibson, and they've done a really good job so far at, I think, limiting that as well. They've been targeted a combined 8 times this year and allowed 4 catches for just 13 yards. And Hufanga so far has 2 interceptions. So I feel really good about the secondary for the 49ers. And you said it, like if guys aren't getting open for the Cardinals, it's just going to mean more time for the 49ers defensive line to get home. And I think they're hungry because like they have been productive, but they haven't really gotten on the stat sheet as much as I'm sure they would like. So I think this could be a game where we see it all come together for them.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're, they'll be able to do that. I think this is the game that they won't let a ton of air yards, but the explosive plays you really got to worry about are on the ground. So
Yeah, that's true. So like that's what I say. Like to me, that's like the biggest key to this game. Like that, and you stop the run first. All those three guys that we had mentioned, and you kind of let the game come to you. It would not surprise me if like the Cardinals offense did start off kind of hot because maybe the 49ers are just trying to see what the Cardinals want to do, and also like the Cardinals so far have been a really good first half team. Like the majority of their points have come in the first half of games. And so if the 49ers could just like weather that storm and keep the game close, I think about like the Rams game when they went into halftime, like tied, like that would be fine. So funny enough, like 49ers and the Cardinals, on average score 18 points per game. They're tied third in the NFL. So, but again, like the Cardinals have had issues with keeping that up in the second half. So that's where usually like the 49ers do make their adjustments and they're able to really pull away from teams. So don't be panicked if you see that the game's really close early. I think I have faith that the 49ers are going to, get it together after the half.
I just really want the 49ers to like, kick their ass, honestly. Like Jonathan Gannon, like, I don't know. There's just something about him that like doesn't sit right with me. And I know nobody wants to hear about, the Eagles or anything like that, like, listen to us now. But I mean, that's part of the reason why I don't like Jonathan Gannon. And the way he was kind of like pumping his team up before the season started, and they're like, "Yeah, I really want to run through a wall." Like he just seems so boring. And he said a couple days ago, like, "Oh, we're the top 10 in most explosive runs." Like it's week 3. Like relax, sit down. And I really want the 49ers to like make him sit down this week. Like deflate his head, please, please, please.
Well, like, okay, this is a good segue into the favorable matchups, but I also like want to talk about the fact that this game, I think, means more than just it being like this divisional game against like, 49ers Cardinals. Like it means so much more because like he was with the Eagles last season. He was a defensive coordinator for the Eagles
Yeah.
when the 49ers played them in the NFC Championship game and Brock Purdy got hurt like 7 plays in or whatever it was. So like I feel like Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, like they want to give it to Gannon a little bit just to show
Mhm.
like this is what we had planned and we would have beat your defense up. It's a totally different team. I know that. Like this is the Cardinals defense, not as good as the Eagles defense was last year, but still I think just like, wanting to give it to them
Yeah.
and prove that they were
In
the
every
better.
degree, the 49ers want to be able to get that back. So, this is the first step right here to do it
Yeah, and as
to the
Ryan
defensive
mentions,
coach.
Brock Purdy's from Arizona, so that's nice too. The game is played in Santa Clara, but still, like you're playing against your favorite team when you were growing up and whatnot. So that could add a little extra juice. And then Pern here says Cards fired Steve Wilkes, and that's true too. Like there's actually a lawsuit that Steve Wilkes has against the Cardinals. So there's some bad blood there too. And that can, like I'm saying, the 49ers, like it's more than just this divisional matchup. Like there's some other like undertones and narratives going into this one. So it could make for a good game. But Laurie, like you mentioned, like Gannon and obviously first year head coach. So like I wanted to point out the fact that yes, the 49ers have they beat the Cardinals twice last year, but this is a different Cardinals team, especially when you look at defense. I would say their defense last year was probably better than it is right now. Like I currently looking at this team, I kind of tend to think it's their weak spot. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I just put up the Cardinals defense up on the screen. So last year, like they had Buda Baker, he's still on the team, but he's injured right now. And they had J.J. Watt, Zach Allen, Isaiah Simmons, all those guys are gone. But those were like impact guys that they had on their defense, who are no longer there. So I mean, if you look at their talent on paper, I think like the Cardinals offense is really what's carrying this team right now. And it's actually crazy to me and I feel like not enough people are bringing this up. It's crazy to me how lucky Jonathan Gannon has been that he's been able to start his head coaching career going up against 3 teams in the division he used to coach in. Like
like that's not even
Washington,
fair.
Washington, Giants, Cowboys, all NFC East teams. And like they're probably gonna play the Eagles later at some point this year. But to get them like for your first 3 games, like that's crazy.
Wow, that's a great point. Like I didn't even think about that. That's amazing. Yeah, like he didn't even really have to do much homework. That's all he did for the last couple of years.
Exactly. So like I gotta imagine,
he's lucky,
right? Like so he and you were saying like, man, it's just week 3. Like, come on now. So I'm curious what this Arizona Cardinals team is gonna look like after like starting this week, right? Because now like you're gonna play other teams who maybe you don't know as well. You don't have that same advantage in preparing and whatnot. So I don't know. We might see a different Cardinals team. I don't know. Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part, but I can't ignore the fact that Gannon knew all those teams and knew them very well. So just saying.
You mentioned the defensive side of the ball, and they are ranked 22nd in yards. Like
allowed,
yards.
right?
Yeah. So like, that's not great. So Aiyuk should have fun. That's their pass defense.
So that's what I'm saying. And like if you look at this new look defense of the Cardinals, they have a couple of 6th round rookies who are starters, like Keitrell Clark, their corner, who I liked coming out of the draft. Like I thought he's nice, like back end draft pick, but he's getting thrown into the fire, right? And so him and Dante Stills are gonna have these tough, like, welcome to the NFL moments as they kind of acclimate to the NFL. And PFF is, I was showing this just a second ago. PFF doesn't think so highly of them so far. You see Keitrell Clark on the bottom right, and you see Stills in the middle of that defensive line there. So I think both of those guys could struggle in this game especially like against a coach like Kyle Shanahan, who's just so savvy and like taking advantage of those kind of matchups. So I do want to start with Brandon Aiyuk here. So glad you mentioned him. You have Marco Wilson, one of the corners on one side, who has allowed a passer rating of 130.4 when targeted this season. And a couple of missed tackles against the Cowboys last week as well. And then, as I mentioned, Keitrell Clark has 4 missed tackles this season. He had 3 last week against the Cowboys. He's allowing a passer rating of 100. I've seen him make some plays. Like I said, like I think he's nice, but I've also seen him get burnt. So like he's going to have those moments. And he's playing against Brandon Aiyuk this week, who, we're expecting him, if Debo's out, to get a lot of volume. And I think Aiyuk is capable of beating anyone out there. Like
I think so too. What's interesting though is the Cardinals, like I mentioned, they're 22nd in like yards given up, right? But they're 3rd in passes defensed with 14. So, and they're tied with actually they're tied for 2nd, technically 3rd, but just because I don't really know why. But the Chargers are 2nd, the Cardinals are 3rd in passes defense. So once it gets there, then they're giving up a ton of yards. But like, they're good at defending, but if it's all about timing and Shanahan, gets Brock Purdy to get it out quick, then they'll be giving up a lot of yards on the ground, like after the catch.
I mean, you saw what Purdy did to the Giants, man.
Exactly.
I mean, and that was like Purdy starting slow and like finding his rhythm against the blitz as the game went on. So at this point, I don't really know if it matters what defenses try to do against Brock. Like, I think he's going to him and Kyle are going to find a way to beat it. And with like this embarrassment of riches of options you have to throw to, like, there's no excuse. You have so many options. So yeah, Brandon Aiyuk, I think, is one. We already mentioned Ronnie Bell as well. I think he's going to see some volume. Chris Conley, maybe even, and Ray McLeod. So it's not like, superstar Deebo Samuel and Aiyuk, but I think it could still get the job done against this Arizona defense.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about George Kittle, because I think he's another guy on this team who could, benefit from Debo being out and get more volume and do something with it. And I'll just say this: the Giants have held all tight ends to less than 80 yards in every one of their games so far. Darren Waller came the closest with 76 yards. But like, Darren Waller's the best tight end that they faced to this point. I think like George Kittle's a better tight end than Darren Waller right now, right? So pretty close, but like I'd give it a Kittle. So and he's the kind of guy that, like, if you forget about him, he will make you pay. And if someone is out with an injury, we mentioned Debo, the 49ers will feed him more than the usual amount, and he will be productive with his targets. So last week against the Giants with Aiyuk out, Kittle had 9 targets, 7 catches, 90 yards. So I would expect him to stay involved in this game. And earlier this week, like I had mentioned, Kittle had 2 touchdowns in each of the 2 games against the Cardinals last season. But as far as like the linebackers go, there's different guys this time around, mainly Kaiser White, who Gannon did bring over from the Eagles. He's been pretty good in coverage, allowing just 64.3% completion percentage when targeted. And he's limiting quarterbacks to a 69.3 passer rating when targeted. The other linebacker, Chris Barnes, might be the other linebacker you want to match up Kittle with. And it's possible Barnes doesn't even play because, he's questionable. So we'll see on that. But yeah, Kaiser White, I think, is like definitely the better of those 2 Cardinals linebackers.
Yeah, no. I agree with you there. I agree with you for sure. I'm not like 100% though on the Cardinals linebackers, just because Buddha is out, or Buddha, so like, man, I have to like look these guys up, because I was watching the one interview. I don't know if it was with Louis Riddick, but or maybe it was Steve Young. He's like, you can't name like 2 Cardinals defensive players, like, and I like really can't, like, outside of the one guy. So it's tough. I don't know. I don't know any of those guys. Like, they're like nobodies.
Yeah. I only can because like I was looking up these names like to prepare, but like otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't have known a lot of these guys. The only guy like maybe on the defensive line is like Zaven Collins, just because like he did give the 49ers some problems last year. But again, divisional opponent, so like he's been with the team, so kind of know some of those guys. But yeah, to your point, like there's a lot of different guys. There's a lot of new guys that like first time starters and all that. So it kind of reminds me of like when the 49ers went against the Rams defense, because it was kind of the same thing. Like, who besides Aaron Donald do you know on that Rams defense? Nobody. They're a bunch of like first year starters and guys with not a lot of experience. And we saw what Kyle Shanahan was able to do against those guys. So kind of expecting a similar outcome against the Cardinals defense here. Hein brings up a good point. Kyle Juszczyk still has no targets this season. Maybe this is the game that we see a little juice action. A game that you don't have Debo, and maybe Elijah Mitchell won't play. I'm not sure about that, but maybe you want to involve Kyle Juszczyk a little bit more. That's another possibility. But again, this offense has so many weapons that they can use. So if one guy's out, it's not a huge deal. And to me, like, the biggest weapon of all is Christian McCaffrey. And it's Christian McCaffrey against this entire Cardinals defense. And I would take Christian McCaffrey like every single time. I've been talking about McCaffrey like tirelessly throughout this week, because I really do feel like he'll have the biggest game of any of the 49ers players in this one. Tackling has been an issue for the Cardinals. They've missed 37 tackles through 3 games per PFF. And for context, like, the 49ers have missed 18. And so 37, that's a huge amount. So if you're bad at tackling, I was talking with Rob about this yesterday. If you're bad at tackling, CMC, Debo, if he is there, but like literally everyone on this offense is tough to bring down after the catch or like after contact. So I'm thinking it's a really big McCaffrey day. And I think another key for the 49ers will be to take care of the football on their end and try to force one on defense. Both teams have done a good job taking care of the football this season. And that's another thing where like they're kind of like evenly matched. And so it'll be interesting to see how, I don't know, one of these teams are going to have to slip up at one point.
I don't think like I think they could be utilizing Christian McCaffrey even more. I mean, if you look at the amount of like targets for running backs, the 49ers, they have Christian McCaffrey like 24th in yards after the catch. In receptions, he's all the way at 15th. Like it should be higher. Like as a team,
Yeah.
not even just using McCaffrey, but like as a team, their running backs like aren't really being utilized as much as they like normally are. So I think they're kind of like just like put on the back burner. So this might be a game where, they're CMC just gets used a lot more.
Yeah, I think so too. And like part of the reason for that is like the run has been so successful that I don't think they've had to throw that much. I mean,
Yeah.
we did see like Purdy throw a ton last week, but before that, like it wasn't a lot. And that was like it was tied for the most that Purdy's ever thrown, 37 times against the Giants. But yeah, like McCaffrey, and I'm glad you brought up that he hasn't really been involved in the passing game because he really hasn't. I think part of that too is because Brock Purdy's not really looking for the checkdowns. You think about in the past, like Jimmy Garoppolo, he was a check down merchant.
Well, yeah,
like,
because he can't throw downfield. There's, but
and like if his first read's not there, it's like okay, check down, check down, check down.
yeah.
But Brock Purdy's a little bit different in that aspect. Like
That's why Gardner Minshew was a really good quarterback because all he did was check the ball down, but nobody like could see it, and they're just like Minshew time, and it's just like what? But yeah, so the same thing with Garoppolo. It's like, oh, he can complete passes. What, to his running back? Like, come on.
Yeah. So like I think that's what we're seeing though. Like because Brock doesn't really just settle for those. So maybe that's part of the reason because they do like have him out there running those routes, having him as a check down option. There was even a play last week where he was the hot route. Christian McCaffrey was the hot route on like one of the blitzes. And it was the Ronnie Bell touchdown, I'm pretty sure. He had the hot route and Brock Purdy decided to throw it to Ronnie Bell instead at the end zone. Usually you do your hot route when you're getting blitzed, but that
yeah,
Purdy takes chances. He pushes the ball a little further down the field. So, but yeah, I mean to your point, like I think this could be a game where like Christian McCaffrey could be utilized more as a receiver, especially if Debo is going to be out because like they're pretty similar in like the skill sets that they have, and also the Cardinals have allowed a running back to score a receiving touchdown in each of their first 3 games. So,
and you know what's funny? Like how I was mentioning, like they're so low right now in running backs with receiving yards, but their EPA is 7th. The 49ers. So it's like they're effective when they do it, but they're just not like doing it that much. So yeah.
Maybe they're saving it for a rainy day. They haven't needed it.
That's what I'm thinking. Exactly.
They haven't needed it yet. So
why pull it out?
Right.
Why pull out ever?
Because they have their was that a joke?
Yeah, it was, but
I caught it. I did catch it. But like you have the Cowboys defense coming up the week after this, and then after that you do have the Browns. So like, yeah, I know some things like you do want to keep in your back pocket. So like I think
still early.
Yeah, for Kyle, I don't unlike, McDaniel over there in Miami, I think Kyle, kind of slow plays things a little bit. He doesn't exactly pull out the entire playbook on one team.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Sometimes
scoring
I do want to
in 2 quarters. Like, come on, like relax.
Sometimes I do want Kyle to just like throw the book at him though. Like this would be the game against Jonathan Gannon that I'd like to see it. The 49ers, without like even really trying, it seems like, have scored 30 points in each of their first 3 games. Like that's
Purdy is just looking so good though, man. Like it's crazy. Like you said, like the hot route is there. but you're going to push that needle a little bit further because you're feeling so comfortable and the game's slowing down like even further. And I know you guys listen to that Steve Young interview and he's like, his heart slows down, like his heart stops beating basically instead of it races with everybody else. Like, and yeah, he just does his job and he's just, dude, man, you guys got to be excited. So
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. There's still people who don't believe in like what he's putting out there, but I think it's like clear as day how much better he is than like Jimmy Garoppolo, for example. And I think it's just exactly what this offense needs. So at the end of the day, like I think this is going to be a really tough matchup for the Arizona Cardinals defense. No matter what they try to throw at him, I think him and Kyle like are going to be able to beat it. Because again, like I also think Kyle has an insane amount of trust in Purdy too that he'll be able to figure it out, and he has so far. It's worked. So
you know what's funny? Like I remember looking up a lot of like stats on Patrick Mahomes last year, and basically like when you blitz Patrick Mahomes, that's the worst thing that you could do because he's gonna find that guy that's open, or he's gonna find that one-on-one because you basically have to double everybody. And then like you think about what happened, last week to Brock Purdy. He was blitzed 31 out of 37 dropbacks, and it's just like you're gonna have to start treating him like Patrick Mahomes. You gotta stop blitzing him because he's gonna find that open guy, and you're gonna have to think of another way to rattle him because that's not gonna be the way to do it. So it's just exciting, to see that.
it might be the way to rattle him like temporarily. Like other teams have tried it. Like I remember against the Bucks last year. Like he started slow in that one, and it was like, oh, like okay, looks like the blitz is the way to beat him, and then like as the game goes on, like he just gets better and better against it. So it's like,
because he's not
okay,
going to check down because he sees that guy that's deep. So teams are going to start, falling back, playing off coverage, and then that's when they're going to start throwing into the running backs out in the flats because the defense is going to back up more and more and more when they realize that the blitz isn't going to work against Purdy.
yeah. So I'm genuinely curious to see what the Cardinals defense are going to try to do against Brock Purdy and this 49ers offense, but we'll see if it works. I have a hunch that it won't though. But Laurie, do you have a score prediction for this game?
I'm gonna go with 17-28. I don't know. I think Dobbs will, he'll I think it's going to be like you were mentioning earlier. Maybe at halftime, 49er fans are going to be a little worried, but they're going to knock them out. Maybe like 14-17, at half, and then the Cardinals only get a field goal for the rest of the game or something.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds believable. Yeah. I'm going to go 34-16. I do think that like 30 is their baseline right now. Like they can sleepwalk into a game and score 30 points. So I think they're going to be just a little bit better in this one, maybe be just slightly more successful in the red zone, and they'll be 34-16. I do agree. Like I think the Cardinals will score, I don't know, let's say like 13 points in the first half, and then they come out and just get a field goal after that or something. So yeah, and 16 is honestly being generous to the card. Like that's me like respecting them. They're gonna get 16 points against this 49ers defense.
Exactly. No, I feel you.
All right, y'all. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Friday night, spending a bit of your Friday with us. We really appreciate it. As always, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Audio listeners, make sure you leave a rating if you haven't yet, or a review, whatever you want to do. But for now, have a good rest of your Friday, folks. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Peace.